Good morning. Welcome. This is Angela Coulter, your Consciousness Transformation Ascension Guide, an originator of Trinity Energy Progression, bringing you this week's Living the Shift. So, frequency and vibration, there's a lot that's going on right now. A lot of people are, I'm just going to turn this on. A lot of people are starting to talk about light language transmissions, and you hear it through people like chanting and using sounds. Good morning, Gloria. You see sound bath healing. You see with the light language, you go to like not just sounds, but there's also like, characters, and there's all kinds of different expressions. And so, everybody's like, well, what is light language? I think it's first of all, it's a term that we decided to create to encompass an idea, but we'll get to that in a minute. The whole frequency thing is something that's really important for us to come to realization about and to accept, because the physics says that our entire universe is built on frequency, right? That's not even going into quantum physics. That's like the basics, right? So quantum physics goes into how frequency interrelates everything. So our cells at the scientific level, right? Our cells are vibrating at a certain rate in order to follow the physics that we created in this particular universe, to hold a density to be able to do the function it created itself to do, right? And that goes concentrically the same for all of as my understanding, for all the consciousness. So what happens is we have a core frequency. So there are terms that are thrown out there in the spiritual realm. One is that you hear a lot of is uh, sounded music of the spheres, right? That's one actually it was popular for a while, and now we're talking about light language. It's all the same thing, right? So music of the spheres is a spiritual concept that everything is the spiritual concept of everything having its own perfect vibration in this symphony of the multiverse. And so when we talk about frequency and vibration, we're still talking about the same thing, just calling it different things. So when we say light language, many people we dress it up because we like to decorate, but we dress it up and say, oh, it's the language of when we were in Lemuria or Atlantis or blah blah blah. It doesn't even matter. I've always hesitated to even use the word light language because, first of all, we still are uh, we're very stuck in the idea of light being source and dark being not source. But that's actually a very dualistic nature, because source, or God, or divine consciousness, of which we're all a part and of which we all are, um, is all of it. It's the light and the dark, right? So when we say light language, I'm like, well, nobody ever says dark language, right? Is this dark language that we're speaking? Because it's, in density, that the sound makes a sound, the voices that we use make sound that, communicate something. So I like looking at it as we can call it source language. We could call it source creation, right? There's so many different ways we can sort of expand the idea of it. But really what it is bringing the vibration of divine creation into our physicality in some way, shape, or form. So we can call it light language. We can call it whatever we want. We can call it the music of the spheres. I love the music of the spheres. I love the idea of it, because the frequency thing, because we equate frequency with sound or music or whatever. Not necessarily the case, because we only call sound things that we can actually hear with our physical ears, which are very limited in terms of interpreting frequency, because we can only just look very physical on the physical plane. Humans and animals have very different ranges of frequency that they can hear. Doesn't mean the frequency doesn't exist. It just means our bodies are not hearing that particular frequency, because the way our physical eardrums and everything else are set up, we aren't evolved to listen to it or hear it consciously. I mean, we feel it. And that's the funny thing. Because we think of something we can hear as the only frequency that exists, which is very limited in our thinking, very egocentric, we can then we then limit our perspective of like what's out there frequency wise. Well, we're interacting with being different levels of frequency. Like what would happen if you could hear every one of your 2 to 3 trillion cells in your body and the frequency they're vibrating at in every given moment, right? It's sort of daunting to think about through the mind. But if you talk about the music of the spheres, let's talk about the way of having this frequency being, first of all, having like every creation in the multiverse, every physicality, every creation and separation in any way, shape, or form has its own perfect frequency so that it aligns in a symphonic way with everything around it, right? That's the way I understand it. And so if it gets out of line, if it gets out of line with its own frequency through the experience of separation, then that's when you get dissonance, right? And you get irritation, you get friction, you get all kinds of things. You get disease within the body. And so then we move into things like what we call energy healing that people like, so many still discount, or they say, oh, it has to be this kind of energy healing to work, or it has to be this, or it has to be that. It doesn't have to be anything. We are the ones who heal ourselves. It's for us to tune into. Really, ultimately, what we're doing is we're tuning into our own music of the sphere. We're our own perfect vibration and reharmonizing to make that so, to bring us to that vibration of perfect, aligned, flowing. Well, we're always perfect, but into that frequency that is in the wholeness of the intention of its creation of the multiverse, right? So there's so much. Yeah, you feel a sense of imbalance, Gloria, exactly. So that's really what we're doing when we get sick. We get out of alignment with that harmonization of our own frequency, right? Or when we are, so in our physical bodies, we create to vibrate and interact with the frequencies in a certain band around us, so that we can see, touch, feel, like, smell, so that we can interact with our senses because of how we created our bodies and where our bodies sit for the purpose of what we've what we've been experiencing here on Earth. So here's the funny thing. As we are now shifting in consciousness, we are raising into a completely different band of frequency and vibration. We're finding there's like a whole bunch of different things happening that just don't make sense, right? And we can start to, like before, we became very dependent on external tools to bring us into that alignment. Right? So we call it medicine of different kinds, whether it's Western, allopathic, or integrative and holistic. It's all the same kind of stuff, right? So when we whatever so like but the way we've thought about it has been very specific and limited as to only these things can help bring me into that alignment of vibration. We don't think of that because we're not taught that that's what the connection is, right? We're not helped to remember, actually. So we're not taught, but in school as kids and everything else, it's like pounded into our brains, like this is what you got to do, this is what you have to, like you have to eat this kind of food, you have to get this kind of nutrition, you have to go to the doctor, you have to, if you have sick, whatever. Instead of, so like if we start to bring our kids up to say, so if you're unaligned with your own frequency, what are you called to do to realign that and reharmonize that? That's the same thing. And so when we free ourselves to say, I can do it in any way I'm guided because my nature, my divine consciousness knows how to do that because I created it to begin with, I can take the steps to unprogram my mind slash ego and say, instead, I'm going to go and change this via using whatever. I see Anna Champagne's here. She's big on color vibration, and that's certain rays hold a certain band of vibrations. So they help us to do that until we remember, by the way, that we don't need any of that because it's all inside of us anyhow, right? So it's all these things that we can use. So you can use things outside of you with the purpose of eventually realizing, coming to the place of saying, okay, I've used this enough to retrain myself to remember how to access that without anything external. And now I can do that. That's, and that's really what practice training energy progression that I created is all about. And that's is about getting just straight to divine consciousness without needing. So the mind has all these definitions. The ego has all these definitions. That's what it was created for. It was created to explore, separation and identity, right? Definitions and boxes, right? Exclusions, defining based on what's not, what something is not, which is what a majority of what we do here while we're this part of our consciousness embodied does. So what happens is we have such a deeply embedded habit for those of us who've been here in many lifetimes, many iterations, we are in this really deeply ingrained habit of feeling like we have to use words and sounds to create something, which powerful creation tool. It is a tool to help us remember how to focus our energy to do that creation, right? So, we talk about, there are belief systems that believe that the whole universe was created with the sound Om, right? And then the saying abracadabra, I think, comes from Aramaic, and it means I create as I speak, right? So it's a way of focusing the way that we speak. Good morning, Anna. Thank you about my colors. So what you when we get to a place of saying I have to create with my words, then we have believed for a very long time, or a very long set of experiences, that that's how we have to create. But then in a way, we've sort of forgotten that consciously, right? So we've gotten so caught up in all this noise and chatter of the ego, because as we've gone along in this evolution of separation, as we have created it, in density like this, we've forgotten where we started from, right? And that where it starts from, where it still starts from, because there's no time anyway. And so now it's time for us to remember. So one of the first steps is coming to a place of realizing that frequency is our creation, is our creation in this multiverse. And we can transform it. We are it. It can change anything. And it's and so like so let's take so when we say the light, like I was saying before, the light language, and I try not to use that lingo, because it excludes dark, which is not part of the whole, and the whole is what the divine consciousness is. So when we say, source language or source, what was the other word? There was another term that my friend and I used yesterday. We were talking about this. Sarah, if you're here, which I think you are, and you remember, it was like source, was it source language? It was source something else. Because language is that creation of the sound, right? We don't have to do that. But the way we define it is to say it's a language, right? Because language is a way we communicate. So what's interesting is if we think about the idea of telepathy, we think about, do we call it telepathy language? We just call it telepathy, or we call it connection. Like, I don't even call it telepathy, because we always talk about source communication. Yeah, I know. I was thinking, Sarah, what was that? Anyway, so the thing is for us to get out of our heads in definition, right? And that's why we try to come up with a term for it, right? Like, I'm even trying to think of a term that we had put together, and it wasn't quite source communication, because we said that and they were like, oh, that's too. We were like, that's too. But it's source creation, I think. Didn't we say source creation? Source creation is truly what people believe to be, or what we call light language, but it's really creation language. And so source creation language, which to me feels so much more powerful, even because it doesn't exclude anything, right? And we've gotten into that habit of saying, oh, the light has to be good and the dark is bad, but it's all divine, the dark and the light, because it's all part of the whole. Dark, like light, cannot be defined without the darkness, and vice versa. Therefore, it was created in duality, and therefore It's for us to transcend that. But so, and the thing about the transcension on that with healing in terms of vibration and frequency is when we accept that whole and we're not including anything, then we do come into a place of wholeness and whole harmonic and whole symphonic, and then we are completely aligned with our whole divine source self. So, that's like I sort of jumped from very like ant level to very level very quickly. But the thing is, so we have so many different kinds of frequencies. So like I was saying, we have color, we have sound, the way we translate it, but we call it the way we translate it based on our body and our body's creation of how to perceive. And so we are filtering it through those limitations because what I feel and what you feel are two different things. What somebody sees is different things, like even colors, right? Like think of how many bazillions different versions of, like, is it beige, eggshell, tan, blah, 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 right? Cream. You have all like, and like if you have 10 people look at a color, they might give three different or 10 different definitions of what they're seeing. So, yeah, whole creation, something like that. Yeah, because anything communicated is a creation. But when we look at vibration, so the first step is to realize it's vibration, right? So it's vibrationally matched. To get rid of dissonance within the body, we create something of a frequency that will help to shift the frequency within us. Yeah, we all translate differently based on our experience, but it is a translation, so that's the key. Because as soon as we try to put words to something, then we are filtering it, limiting its power. Now, we can also use it to focus our power, and like I was saying, the abracadabra, I create as I speak, and the whole Om thing, right? The creation of the universe idea. But the next step is the first step is to recognize that and to start playing with it, right? So one of the things that when I teach Trinity, we talk about this all the time, is the first thing to do is align thought, word, and deed, and it's not something we have to do, but it is something for us to retrain ourselves to get out of our own way, right? Because it's the mind that tries to define and control. So when we align thought, word, and deed into this place of unconditional love and wholeness and that symphony and that frequency, then we have like complete flow, complete power of creation. But part of the game is in this part of our consciousness that's here is forgotten, gets how to do that in this separation because we created such density here and exclusion. So now is the game of remembering how to do it while we're still here in separation. So the first steps are aligning thought, word, and deed. So really, as basic as your thoughts, right, and your words, those are frequencies that we translate into words. And we're taught that from a very early age to translate things into what we call language. And so we are entrained to believe, we allow ourselves to believe that our power is through our words. So if we believe that, then that is true. That's what we'll create. And so the first step is to really optimize the use of our words, whether it's in our minds or in our voices. And they've done so much studies, so many studies about this that are spot on as to the effects of these things. And I'm not even just talking in the alternative world, right? Because if people come in and they're like, oh, well, blah, 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 and is it scientifically proven? It's like, well, okay, scientifically proven. um, and by the way, it's the mind that says, oh, it has to be scientifically proven. We exist in infinite creation, right? So as we get beyond these limitations and rules that we've created for ourselves, we realize that we can create faster than definition, which means that we will far exceed what science, as we have known it, has been like, struggling to keep up with, except quantum physics, which is really the first science that's really talked about this consciousness and the energy and how it's all affected in frequency and stuff like that. So if you haven't looked into that, it's very fascinating stuff. And if you realize, if you have that kind of mind that says, oh, I want to see it in science or whatever, there's a form of it, a form of consciousness in science, quantum physics. So so we go about and we create with words. So what we think and what we say create a certain vibration and frequency. And if we're constantly saying something that is negative, if we're constantly, when I say unconditional love, we're part of our experience here is to feel like we're limited and to be in lack, and therefore we don't have unconditional love for ourselves because we feel like we're lacking something all the time in this separation. And then we are judging ourselves and blaming ourselves, and then we judge and blame other people and all that kind of stuff. And the more we do that, the more we create it. And so as we change the thought, word, and deed to be conscious of, first of all, what we're thinking, what we're saying, and then what we're doing to align with that wholeness, then we become far more powerful in our creation. So that's like step one, which is a huge step and takes a long time to master that. I mean, we all are part of it is just to be observant of the word we're using at all times because we have put so much power in them in the creation. If we're saying the entire universe was created with one word, right? We put so much power in that frequency, then we are like abusing our own power, right? And then claiming victim to it because we don't realize what we create within ourselves, right? So so then that's the first thing, the aligning of thought, word, and deed into unconditional love, into higher consciousness and higher frequency, into wholeness, all kind of stuff. So as we come into practice and alignment on that here, the next part is going into a place of realizing that even words are simply frequency expressed. Sounds are simply frequently expressed as to the ability of our physical bodies as they have evolved to where they are now. So, some of the first exploration of this is going into frequency and sounds, right? Colors and pictures, right? They help us remember how to align in certain frequencies. Smells, even anything that has to do with our physical senses and our physical body. So that's the next step, right? So we have a lot of sound healing going. There are some really cool experiments out there. If you have not seen them, go out there and look for them on YouTube, where they take the sand and they put it on this frequency generator and they set it at different hertz levels, right? And what's really, really cool is how when they set them at different hertz levels, the sand reshapes itself into forms into geometric shapes on its own. Like nobody touches it. Like you just change the frequency. That's pretty cool. And it connects this whole frequency, what we think is sound, but it's really a vibration to create a certain shape. And then we call that, sacred geometry too, because it's sacred meaning from the whole consciousness, from the divine consciousness and creation, right? So in a way, it's almost like, well, the sacred geometry itself is another expression, right, of that source communication, whole creation, whatever you want to call it. Light language. So we've become entranced with that whole topic. So it comes comes the light language thing, right? So as we're shifting frequencies, we are now perceiving and remembering the creation codes, right, which are the vibration, the frequency, the creation frequencies as the divine. And the more that we do that, then our first inclination through the mind is, oh, I want to bring it into here. And I have to do it through my physical body. And so some are doing it through chanting and in different ways, like I said, painting and dancing and all kinds of what we call intuitive arts, which is part of why it's become more expansive and why right now we've had such a great period of time to be able to step back and do more of that and be more of that. But going back to our cells, our cells are little multiverses in themselves, and they have their perfect frequency of wholeness, right? And they're part of, say, our organs, and then our physical body, and then concentrically, collectively, the consciousness gets bigger in its makeup, our solar system, the galaxy, the universe, the multiverse, and it all is fitted together in this beautifully intricate, amazing, incredible creation that we are. And so when we set our intention of creation, because our mind says, oh, I still have to do that with words, right? In my mind, even if it's in my mind, I got to do it with my words. If we set our intention of creation to be, you know, to have all of it flow in its intended creation of orchestration in this multiverse, then we can let it go and let ourselves realign. And that's all we can even just do that. And by the way, at some point you get past the words. And by the way, at some point you get past the sounds and the colors and everything else. So really, we're retraining ourselves with the tools outside of us to remember that we're the ones who created the tools in the first place, to remind ourselves, and that we have access to those frequencies at any given moment. So so it's so incredibly powerful, right? And the key, as to anything else, is to allow ourselves to go past every tool that comes out from us as we are continuing to evolve in our remembrance, and our realization. And so, like, one of the things that, because I've been seeing this for a long time, and I know a number of people who are doing, like, what they call light language, right? Which is, again, that expression through the voice that many imply. And sometimes I see a lot of characters, which is sort of cool, because I had some of those come through a long time ago, and it was just a matter of touching them out, or like in my mind touching them out there to whatever, and it was no words needed. When we get past the words needed phase, that's when our creation becomes even more instantaneously powerful, right? So interestingly, our first inclination is to bring it through in the standard ways. Okay. And I feel that part of that exploration experience is that in bringing the vibration through our physicality, right, through our five physical senses in this dense state, that we are evolving, helping ourselves to evolve those physicalities very quickly. And when we do that, then eventually we don't even have to like, so for example, what I was seeing was those oh yeah, Anna said that she saw things about the metal filings on a speaker and they made the patterns, which is so cool with frequency. But anyway, so then we get to a place of, you know, what I've been seeing is, like, I've listened to multiple people I know who are going out there and using their voices for the light language stuff. And the first time I heard somebody do it, I was like, oh yeah, I know this. And I can respond in it. And I remember using it at a different time, different place, whatever, different dimension, it doesn't even matter. And I felt very compelled to join them, but I didn't, because it was a group thing at the time. Then, I listened to a couple different people, and every time I got to this place where I would connect as source, because that's what we all are, right? As divine consciousness, and from our common place, I could almost, I knew the creation codes, if that's what we want to call them. I knew what they were bringing through with their, what they were putting the effort forth to bring through with their voice. So I connected to it pre words and pre sound, even though they were creating the sound here, which was nice, a nice alignment. But something was sort of sitting with me that was sort of odd about that. Not odd, something else. It was like something more. And what came to me last week was, I was listening to somebody who I know who does it. I was guided to go and listen to something that we had done, like she had done with our Ascended World page. And while I was listening to it, I started making noises myself. And I wasn't trying to do anything, right? I aligned with whatever it was, that the creation codes or whatever that were coming through with her thing. And I was doing something completely different, but it opened up the bringing of that sound, that frequency here into a completely different paradigm. And then I realized, oh, because the way we have done things so singularly here, we're so used to and entrained on having like one piece of the symphony, like you're the flute player, I'm the piccolo player, there's a violin player and the trombone and whatever, and then we create more and more and more. And so now we're tuning back into that music of the spheres. We're tuning back into that ultimate vibration of source, of divine consciousness, divine creation as we are, and remembering its frequency as a whole and still expressing it as an individual. And so we're still in train and in practice of bringing that in, bringing that in through an individual speaker. So it's like a I don't want to call it a monotone speaker. What do they call that? Yeah, like a monotone speaker. What was it before? Not stereo, but I can't remember the word. But anyway, it's like bringing through one speaker instead of two. And it's not that it's not powerful, because it is. It's a new frequency that we're bringing in here, right? But it's still limited in what we believe it to be and what we're in training or have been trained ourselves to be. So, but the thing is to expand ourselves, and then we expand our vibration to a place where at some point we can open our mouths and then the whole symphony just comes out, right? Instead of the one line of whatever. So, like, what if we all got together, a bunch of us got together in that pure form of connected and divine consciousness, and we started all doing what came to us in whatever form of that source creation communication light language that you want to call it, and listened and see the portal of opening and remembrance that came in through that expression. Because many of us would get out there and we're so used to being individual practitioners that we're like, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm doing this, and I'm guided to express this, and that's great. And then it's like, okay, so if I'm expressing this in my body's ultimate form and you are, and then 20 other people are, then let's get together and do it, because then we come together into a different level of remembrance and expansion, right? So then I was like, oh, that's amazing. And that was so incredible, just doing it like myself, listening to the recording outside of space and time with my friend. And so then the next step beyond that, so then it's for us to do that. And then the next step beyond that is to just not even need to make what we call a sound or a color or a name. We don't have to give it a name. We don't have to call it by a face. We simply become or remember that we are it. We are the symphony. We are the music of the spheres. And when we hold that while we're still individual, that is such an acceleration of evolution and consciousness. And then it becomes so easy. Well, it's all easy when we allow it to be. So that's really, so it's funny because go back to Trinity Energy Progression, which is the practice that I started. My guidance is actually it takes you from zero to there. Like, and then so what happens is all along the way is your mind has to catch up. That's what I tell people all the time is like, so we open those lines up, right? And remember and open all the pathways up that remember that we are the divine source, right? Divine consciousness. And then all the other stuff is stuff we've created in separation. And then like, it's all like all removing those partitions and getting them out of the way. And all these things are the things that we're creating in this amazing beauty, in this beautiful, incredible, magnificent time of us being here to bring it in together individually and collectively. Because then, bam, we evolve in a second. It's in a microsecond and we're done. I mean, out of space and time, we're already done anyway. But it's the whole like realization that when we hear, and that's the fun of it. So this week, just pay attention to that. I mean, there's a lot I just covered, you know, a lot of steps, but it ties together all of what's around us, what's within us, our wellness, talking about, I didn't really even talk about the virus today, right? Because I really don't have it in my reality so much but I do talk about it because it is an opportunity for us to transcend. And when we transcend that dissonance and we allow ourselves to align with our true frequency, and exist in that, then there is no such thing as disease anymore. There's no such thing as needing to be afraid of anything because that is our true realization. Simple as that, right? So that's it for this week. Noodle on that, and just be aware of the frequencies, and look into quantum physics if you haven't. Look at sound healing. See behind me, I have myself what they call alchemy bowls, which I am in love with because they are such a different level of that consciousness come through, of expression of that divine creation code or whatever. And there's just so many different ways that are just, like I said, beautifully brought in through guidance and everything else through remembrance of all of us and more every day. So just pay attention and look it out there, and then ask your guidance if it's there to if it works. It will help you remember that on your own without the dependence. Like, so it's nice to do it for a while, and then it's like, okay, yeah, I get, like right now I use that for this particular frequency, and then eventually I can say, oh, okay, I'm aligned in that frequency. And so what was the other thing I was going to say about that? Oh, I mean, there's a whole practice there about in what they call sound healing, right? Which is aligning in certain frequencies that align your body into a place of, like, knowing that it's filled for that particular vitamin that you believe that you need to fully function. And so then when we hit the vibration of what those vitamins actually, um, you know, create in wellness within our body, then we don't actually have to take the vitamin anymore. And then eventually we don't need the sound because we just remember that wellness, that wholeness, right? And it's pretty cool stuff. So look into all that. Just play a little bit. So so have a great week. We've had a lot to, like I said, a lot to consider today. This is a really big topic. I probably could do like a 6 month class on it because there's so many different facets of understanding it. But look at where frequency is being used for you. Like when you listen to music to feel better, that's using frequency. Different, like, songs feel better to different people because of the frequency and the what we call the scale that the song is done in, or the pattern or whatever. That's all frequency. So things like that, just taking conscious notice of the frequency uses that we have in everyday life, and then set the intention of creation to have all of them align with your whole divine creation of you, like in that symphonic way, harmonic way. So have a great week. We'll see you next time. This is Angela Coulter signing out with this week's Living the Shift.